There's a natural conflict between those two worlds that is also part of the challenge of resolving. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Children's Hospital Los Angeles Vice President and CIO of Research, Dr. Steve Garsky, who has been with us for at least 5 years. And apart from being a triathlete and introducing us to the Nautica triathlon, has also transformed our information infrastructure and backbone from twisted pair to highly integrated big bandwidth systems. All of this while moving into a new $650 million hospital with an information architecture that was designed a decade ago. So there were 1 or 2 changes he needed to make along the way. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Garsky to talk to us about a view from the hospital CIO's office.
Thanks, Randall. Thanks for having me. Thank you so much for having me. This is a much more micro-level view of what we're seeing. Unfortunately, we don't have access to our satellites in space or any of the fun stuff that you just saw. But we try, and we do our best here. And as Randall said, something that we faced about 5 years ago was the fact that we ran into a very disintegrated and horrible type of infrastructure when we came on board here. Our EHR, which is with Cerner, was down 18% of the time, if you can imagine that, in 2006, just 5 short years ago. Our network was up and down consistently, at least once or twice every week. We had PCs on average that were 7 years old, and a lot of the PIs here had no way of accessing the data that we have stored or had stored in our EHR with Cerner. So we had to change all of that, as well as Randall said, get ready for the new hospital building. So this is a much more condensed view of what we're looking at. But it is nonetheless very important. You would not be able to do all the things that JPL and NASA are doing without the actual data coming from the sites like ourselves and all the other hospitals that are now coming online. Less than 10% of the hospitals across the U.S., out of approximately 4,200, actually have an EHR in place across both their ambulatory and their hospitals. So it is now starting to ramp up thanks to some of the legislation that's been pushed through, but it is a long time in coming. We do have all of our inpatient data flowing through, and we are now working on getting all of our ambulatory up and running, and that is going very well. So there's a lot of data now that is being stored. 5 years ago, we only had 4 terabytes. We're now above 200, 250 terabytes and growing extremely fast. Not to mention all the genomics cores that are here at CHLA that are growing exponentially as we speak. So what I wanted to do today, and please make this interactive, stop me at any point if you wish to ask any questions, but just to give you a level, a CIO's level view of what we face in trying to provide all the PIs and all the research data that is required, not only here at CHLA but across the country and globally, as you just saw. So what I'll cover today is just some real quick things. Some of the areas that I just briefly mentioned was meaningful use data and what we are doing to meet the requirements that are forthcoming from our government. Some of the complexities of where the data sits and how we're addressing those. How we're going to connect all those and integrate all those data points that was, again, briefly touched on. How we govern that data, and that is an extremely important area that is often overlooked when we get to having enough data to be able to govern. And then, of course, us terrible IT folks who do not want all the data to be distributed across the country and the world based on your name and other information. So we do have to monitor that. So this is just a real quick view of the meaningful use requirements that are being floated down to hospitals now through the ARRA Act. And this is our dashboard. And we have just, over the last year or so, started tracking this, and there are funds that are associated with this. So if we meet the top level piece below the gray line there, then we are eligible for upwards of $27 million here at the hospital to be able to reinvest back into our EHR and supporting applications. And you can see all the different types of data that are required. This will help us and help all of you to be able to gather and then store all of this data in an acceptable format. So when you saw the last presentation, you see how you have to match up all the data sets, and there was one slide that described that. If you do not capture the data correctly, obviously, then you're going to run into massive amounts of data. And I've been pushing for standards across healthcare to be able to make it easier for all of this data to be able to be consolidated into EHRs, EHIs, everywhere else you want to gather that data across the U.S. Because right now there are no standards, and try to match up 9 different variations of asthma from a pediatric hospital to an adult hospital to even another type of pediatric hospital is nearly impossible. So it takes so much time, and those standards are very important. This helps get us there for some of the basic data elements. And we're moving right along here at CHLA, and things are moving fast. But other hospitals, again, less than 10% even have EHRs in place. And you can imagine what kind of data is going to be available once they are in place. This is an example of all the different applications that were here at CHLA in 2003. The different colors represent different applications and different vendors that were integrated here at CHLA. And the reason that I wanted to show this is because this is what a lot of other CIOs face or have faced, in the sense that there are so many different vendors, there are so many different applications, and how in the world are you going to integrate all these disparate types of data elements across your organization when you have this chaos? And so this is what we faced in 2003. You have your core clinicals, you have your core patient-related systems, you have your core patient management systems, and your core financials on the right-hand side. And those are just the high-level, most critical applications across this organization, and as I found, across other hospitals as well. Well, one of the most important things that we did is to be able to consolidate this. What we tried to get to were utilization of the EHR that we have in place, as well as our financial systems, to be able to get to this view. The green represents our EHR, our Cerner vendor, and the red represents our PeopleSoft vendor. Once we were able to get to this point, we were more likely and have been much more successful in being able to consolidate that data across our enterprise, giving the vPICU and various other databases within CHLA and across the country the data that is needed out of this prestigious hospital. So this was a very important piece. It also allowed us to consolidate vendors, and I get hundreds of emails a day from multiple vendors across the world trying to sell us their products. Not only having to manage that, but also trying to manage the vendors that we have in place every day is a major challenge. So this allowed us to manage those vendors and then also to save millions of dollars across the organization that have then been since reinvested back into not only these applications, but other applications that have allowed us to expand our data sets. This is something that is absolutely critical from a hospital level and a CIO's perspective, in the sense that in order to integrate all of those systems, you have to have a robust and vibrant interface engine. This is just one page of a multiple-page document that shows all the interfaces across our environment, just in our mid-size hospital here at CHLA. Imagine mixing just one data element across one of these interfaces in this environment. You immediately put, or you could put, a child's life in danger. And it is absolutely critical that each and every data element is managed to the core of our interface engine, and we do that on a daily basis. And again, this is just one page of that. So the complexity of being able to manage what we do here at this hospital, to be able to get the correct and reliable data to the PIs, is absolutely essential. We use eGate here, which is now moving over to Java, and we are expanding upon these interfaces as we grow. And as more and more of the new data that comes across our environment is in existence across CHLA, we then make sure that it is fully integrated into our systems, as you can see. Some of the key challenges that we've faced and some of the requirements that we have to meet, we have to make sure that our electronic health record system is to the standards that we need at this organization. If you're familiar with EHRs, there's some big ones like Epic and Cerner and Eclipsys and a few others out there. There are major differences, and especially when you get down to the data elements and the structures of databases that exist out there. If you look at an Epic system as an example, they're a hierarchical database structure. If you look at a Cerner database structure, they are based on an Oracle Star distributed database type platform. When you compare those two and the way that they are able to extract data from those databases, there are major differences. And as you see the evolution of Epic as an example, which is the largest EHR vendor out there, they are looking to move to a distributed database in the future. Now, nobody knows when, but that is absolutely critical to their successful future and various others across that use mumps and other types of antiquated database structures. This will change, this has changed the way people look at it, and if you look in a lot of the literature associated with distributed versus hierarchical, you'll see that distributed in the end, from a technologist perspective, will definitely win. We are able to gather the information out of our EHR via that distributed database so much more easier than we are through others, through Epic and other type of hierarchical databases. That allows us to be able to report out of any database that we create across CHLA, including the VPICU. Real-time data, a lot of the challenges associated with this is that, of course, PIs and researchers want to be able to have the data real-time. That is very difficult to be able to ping your production database on a minute-by-minute basis. That does drag down your performance. So what we do here is we have approximately an hour window where we do pull data within our production database and populate a separate database to be able to pull all the data out of that. That is a constraint, though, that most of the CIOs have to face. Those requirements, as I stated, make sure that it's integrated. You have the speed, the interface, the reliability, and the support that are necessary for an EHR that you implement. As I discussed earlier, the infrastructure is absolutely critical. We've replaced our entire network here, and that has been difficult. We started it in 2008, but we are now, if we wish, gigged to the desktops, and we can give you as much speed as you want across, and that is extremely important when you start seeing a lot of these genome labs, for example, that are sending terabytes across from between us to USC or intra campus wide. It has made it much better and much more seamless. We also needed that new network for our new hospital. We've also consolidated our wireless, so our Wi-Fi, our paging, our cellular, all wireless is now going through one antenna as opposed to multiple antennas across all of the ceilings or roofs within CHLA campus. And that consolidation has been highly successful, and we have the best bandwidth possible on the wireless side. We also have QoS, or quality of our services, monitored and managed on a regular minute-by-minute basis now across our environment, which has made a huge difference. Of course, the constraints, again, we don't have satellites, so we are constrained by our costs here within CHLA, and as much money as I receive is as much as I can do. The time and difficulties to implement that, there's been a lot of change across CHLA, as you've heard, with the new hospital building, but we also have to make sure that we don't inundate too much change and bring down our systems at the same time. And one of the most critical challenges we're facing right now is knowledgeable staff. Anyone that has technical abilities right now is being sought after, and this is one of the best careers to have right now as everything grows. But at the same time, as a manager and as a CIO, it is very hard to find anyone that has the abilities that are necessary. And going overseas is not necessarily the answer. They're not here. They're good for programming, but to be able to manage anything technical on site for a hospital like ours is nearly impossible. So we have insourced everything with the exception of some application design and creation. But for the most part, everything is managed here on site. We have to make sure that we maintain a 5.9 or 6.9 uptime. That's a given. And we have to make sure everything's modern and reliable on our hardware and software side. And I've talked about wireless convergence. Data governance. As I stated earlier, it's one of the most important things that we face here at CHLA because that relays back into your security and how you're able to manage that security. If you don't know where the data is going or how much or what type of data is moving across your campus or beyond, you are in trouble. And I just noticed that I don't have much time left, so I will try to move through this quickly. This is just an example of our data governance structure across CHLA. We manage this within our upper levels of our organization, and it has been able to manage we have been able to manage our data moving across. But as you know, with the expansion of all the data that is coming, this becomes much more important. These three aspects of data security are absolutely critical. Some of the things I wanted to highlight with security as far as being able to get all the data out there to you without any fines coming back or being in the media is the fact that we've implemented some tools like DLP, where data loss prevention, where we are now monitoring all of the data that leaves our campus. So it actually scans your emails and other portals to be able to see what is actually in the data leaving our campus. And that is based on a table set of rules, and so we can add to that table. And if we want to limit everything that Randall sends out, which we try to do on a regular basis, we just add Randall's name to it, and he is stopped. And then automatically encrypted. So we don't actually stop the data. We automatically encrypt it, and it is sent to a secure space for someone to pick up. This is becoming much more important, as you probably have noticed, as data is flying across the country. Multiple hospitals and health systems have been fined, and the fines have now just gone up over the last year, or I think just came into effect this year. And $250,000 is one of the first fines. So we have to be very, very careful of what data is leaving our organization. So I think I'm right on time. Any questions that you would like to ask me? Great. I must have covered it all. Great.
Good job.
Thank you.
Steve will be around in the break, and I wanted Steve to talk from the perspective from which he talked, because a lot of folks who don't work in healthcare often aren't quite sympathetic to a lot of the issues that we face. There are major issues about security from two points of view, as Steve said, confidentiality and HIPAA rules, but also the production system uptime. I work on both sides, and I want to be able to go suck all the information out of our clinical information servers. But if somebody like Dr. Warburton over there is doing that while I'm sitting by the bedside waiting for my monitor to give me clinical data relevant to that sick child right now, if that performance is degraded or blocked or stopped by some researcher over here in the Sorbonne Research Institute, that's intolerable. Or if the system's brought down by all of us guys who are looking for data in the middle of the night, and the bedside information isn't there, that's an unacceptable risk. And those are mandatory things that we have to think about from a research architecture point of view and a research governance and implementation point of view that have to be totally respected. Otherwise, the marrying of these enterprises aren't going to happen. Valerie, you had a question.
Two-part question. So in the old days, I guess some proprietary systems couldn't work with this ability. I wanted to know if that's changed. And have you built or are you currently building some sort of data warehouse or something to deal with this variation?
A great question. So the first question, as far as proprietary, we actually have moved away from any vendors that will not allow us to pull their data. And we build into our contracts and have renegotiated the contracts that we have in place to be able to have full access to all data regardless of what the requirements are. So that is that one first slide that I showed you, the 2003 with all those different applications. That was another reason why we tried to consolidate and make sure we went with the right vendors. And your second question? Clinical data warehouse, absolutely. Well, we're looking at multiple different vendors for clinical data warehouse, which include Oracle, even Cerner, various others. We do have one EHR clinical data warehouse, which stores all of our EHR information. And then we also pull from various others, like our CompuRecord area and the anesthesia. And we pull that into another vPICU database. But we are looking at a much grander scheme and likely Oracle. Absolutely. Much more robust, much more available, and one that I don't have to worry so much about security on. Yes.
Thank you, Steve. I'm going to allow one more question, and only because it's coming from the person whose talk it's probably going to cut into. John wants to ask a question. Then we're going to break, and we'll come back at 10:35-ish, only a 15 instead of a 20-minute break. Food and posters are that away. And we'll try and keep on schedule with it.
So one of them is going to be a game changer as far as privacy is having secure opt-in for patients. So if patients want to opt to allow the data to be available to some patients, I'm wondering if you have implemented opt-in, or you thought about it, or if you're not first.
We've definitely thought about it, and we are actually in the process within our ambulatory rollout of implementing signature pads. So the infrastructure is being built to allow us to put any type of form that we wish in front of the patients and their families to be able to allow for the opt-in. My task is to have the infrastructure available to make sure that when we are ready to do an opt-in form or change the consent form or whatever the case is, that we are able to do that, and we are on that road and very close to it. So yes, we have thought about it extensively. All right, so Randall ran away. All right, thank you very much.